Wild world of personnel, whether it's at the college level or at the professional level with an NFL team, there is an element of, hey, you got to be a little bit of crazy to want to work in this industry. The hours you put in, the moves you make, all that you put up with, the time in the building, all of it lends itself to a certain kind of person. And that person joins us today, Kirby O'Meara. He's been with a number of programs, both Group of 5 and Power 4, now with the athlete group as he continues his rise through the personnel and football world. Joins us to talk about his stops, to talk about what he learned from some of the great people in football, the culture, the aspects of what to do and not to do if you're looking to get a job. So much more here on Scouting the League. Everybody, and welcome to Scouting the League. Another week and another chance for you to head over and like, subscribe, and share this podcast or video wherever you are watching and listening. Of course, we are up on YouTube. You can find all our videos there. We are at our home at Fans First Sports Network. You can always go out and find our episodes, our past episodes, as well as a bunch of team-focused episodes all across the league. You can find us there, as well as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. Make sure you like, subscribe, really share with a friend, continue to help us grow. Give us your comments, leave us your notes, again, wherever you are listening at. As always, today we will be joined by Neil Stratton, who is fresh back from a nice overseas trip that he got to take, and hopefully he is back on our time zone, but he is at Inside the League on X. InsideTheLeague.com is his website. Succeed in Football, his outstanding blog where you can go read more of his information, thoughts from the week, and really insightful stuff. Make sure you are signed up for his Friday wrap. You can find that again on his X page to make sure you have the weekly news and notes of everything happening in the football world. I am Rodrik David at RightStepADV. RSAfootball.com is the website where you can go check out everything, or you can head over to thescoutingcommunity.com. Whether you are a current NFL scout or an aspiring NFL scout, we have spots for you. Exclusive only to NFL scouts is that scouting community group. We've got mentors, a really cool development piece that's going to be coming out probably just after the 4th of July. We're going to have an in-depth salary and data survey. Make sure you check that out, get everything signed up, and our long list of mentors as well. You can go check that out at thescoutingcommunity.com. For aspiring scouts, monthly meetings, networking, learning what you need to know actually about becoming a scout, how to do it, the steps you can take with actual scouts and people in the football world who want to help you along the way. You can check all of that out at thescoutingcommunity.com. And to today's episode, our guest, Kirby O'Meara. He has been a man that has been at the SEC program, makes a stop at Central Florida, ends up in Wyoming, now with the athlete group, along with our past guest, Jake Rosenberg, former Philadelphia Eagle. The athlete group continuing to take college programs and football programs across the country to different levels. Big announcements from one of their groups at the Oklahoma Sooner. Kirby is our guest today, a man that knows football, that has a passion for it. Really excited to jump in with Kirby. Kirby, welcome to Scouting the League.
I appreciate it. Happy to be on.
Always good to talk football with football guys, and your background, the stops you've made. You are a football guy. I could sit here, go through where you've been, who you've been with, but again, we're going to work that into the whole story because, again, you've been some big-time spots. You've been with some people that are, again, we've had on the podcast that we've loved to have on the podcast, people that are, again, really shaping the way college football, where it's all going. So why don't you give us your origin story, where you've been, how you got there, how'd you get into football, and eventually we'll get a little bit of it where you're at now.
Yeah, so go back to, from kind of the start. So from Georgetown, Texas, I was the kid that, I grew up obsessed with football. My favorite player when I was a kid, I've got the book right back there, is Johnny Unitas. I was the, old school. I grew up on, NFL films, and the joke It is funny. I think my family jokes that like I was destined to be in football because like I was named after a football player, just a player. They were watching the Super Bowl and they were like, "Hey, Kirby, that sounds like a good name." First gift in the hospital was a football. Just all these random things. I watched, like I said, I watched NFL films instead of cartoons when I was a little kid, things like that. So always was obsessed with it before I even knew what it was. I was the kid that like at 10 years old. I was watching every minute of the draft. Like we joke that the draft was basically the holidays in my household. It was, you know, birthday, Christmas, and draft, like some order, somewhere in that order, but that was the top three for sure. And it's always kind of been that way for me. So before I even knew what scouting was, before I really knew what any of it was, I kind of knew I wanted to be involved in it. And I was, I played all the main sports, football, baseball, basketball. Wasn't great necessarily at any of them, but just love playing all the sports. And in high school, I picked up long snapping. I was a center, and so it was kind of like I was actually lucky enough to have some coaches in high school that really trained guys to long snap. We actually might be the only high school in America that had this, but we had like 2 or 3 days a week. We had a morning session of whoever wanted to learn how to long snap would come in there. Now, it wasn't great coaching or anything like that, but we actually had like back to back to back snappers that went to college, and so started doing it there, and then went to a camp and realized I was actually maybe good enough to do it, and had somebody mention, hey, you can maybe do this at a Division I level, and kind of took off from there, and ended up walking on at TCU. Went there for my first year. Was there. We actually went to the Fiesta Bowl that year. We're number 3 in the country. It was Alabama, Texas, and then us. And so, anyways, had a really interesting, fun year that year. Transferred to Central Arkansas. After that, I was a walk on, and as a lot of people know, one long snapper gets a scholarship, and that's a very expensive school to go to. And so, transferred there, earned a scholarship there. Started 4 years. Like I said, knew I wanted to work in football. Didn't know what it looked like. Didn't really know what scouting was, just kind of tried any way to figure out how to get into it. Had a coach on our staff at Central Arkansas that got hired on the recruiting staff at Arkansas, and he was actually on his way out. He was about to take another job, and he's like, yeah, they need somebody to come up here and volunteer. I'm sure if you want to just, come volunteer up here, you can do it. And I had actually graduated with my degree in accounting and finance and was working an accounting job at the time. But it was a temp job, and they tried to actually keep me on or hire me full time. And I just wanted to keep it a temp deal because I was trying to get a football job at that time. And I joke, I'm like the only man in America to go home to his wife and say, hey, great news. Right before we get married, because I got hired at Arkansas a week before we got married. So right before we're going to get married, I'm going to quit my job that pays. You're going to leave your job that pays, and we're going to go move up to Fayetteville, and I'm going to make no money, but it's going to work out. Some way, shape, or form, it's going to work out. And so got back from the honeymoon, went up there, started working up there. I was driving an hour to and from work every day for the first month because I was staying with my in-laws. And then ended up having actually a guy that I'm still really close with to this day, who's a coach at Mississippi Gulf Coast. Let me crash with him in his apartment, and then anyway, so worked my way from unpaid to like 10 hours a week, 20 hours a week, 40 hours a week. Finally got put on full-time staff 3 years in, which was kind of a big deal there because they created a position for me. We actually had at the time the smallest personnel department in the SEC, so it was kind of like I said, not necessarily the easiest thing. And 8 months after I got put on full-time staff, we all got let go, as is kind of the way things go. So in that process, I actually went through, and I had seen some article on Football Scoop of a guy who had been a GA, and he talked about how when his staff got let go, he thought it was the worst thing that ever happened to him. And he realized when that happened, after he went through it, it was actually one of the best things that could happen to him, because all of a sudden his network, it only worked at one program. His network now went all across the country. And so I kind of took it as, okay, I'm going to turn this into a positive. I kind of have the mentality, like, once a walk on, always walk on. I joke, I walked on 3 times. I walked on at TCU, I walked on at Central Arkansas, and I walked on at Arkansas, basically. And so, like, I always had that mentality. And so when Coach Bielema got let go, there was about a 2-week window, and I went through and I did an evaluation, like full scouting report on every player on the roster, because I was like, this is something I can do to show some value to the new staff that comes in. They came in, Chad Morris' staff, and actually it's funny, the more I've learned about the business, I respect more so what they did now, but they cleaned house. They came in, met with every department head, say, hey, we know who we're going to hire. We're going to bring in our own people. Just let your whole staff know that, that we're letting everybody go. So I cleaned out my desk, went out, had the reports I had typed up, left them on like every desk of anybody, coordinators, head coach, the guy who had been the director of play personnel, who was a high school coach in Texas, and had, a connection from one of my high school coaches to that guy, just enough to be able to like get let back in the building that next day. Came back in and said, hey, they're going to pay me, severance. You might as well let me work for free. You got to hire somebody. And they were like, you know what? Yeah, okay, that works. And also it was like, also those packets of evaluations, that was me. And so they agreed to let me do essentially a working interview, kind of open-ended. They were like, hey, we don't know how, we'll just see. We'll let you, try it out. 1 week later, they officially hired me back onto the staff. And a month after that, so got retained, really had great connections, really liked all the people on that staff. And about a month after that, my first boss at Arkansas, E.K. Franks, who had given me my first chance and bumped me up, all that, got hired and promoted actually to the director of play personnel position at Florida. And it was one of those calls where I think we've all had them or heard of them. It wasn't a, hey, do you want to take this? It was a, you're coming down here. What do we have to do? So went down there, started in January, it was at 2018, and spent 4 years at Florida. Had a really, up and down, really high moments, really low moments. But it was a really good experience. Still, have some of my best connections, best relationships to this day from that time. And then, so again, 4 years goes by again. We get let go. This time it actually was a legitimate clean house. And so spent a few months, interviewing, trying to figure out the next place. Ended up getting hired at Central Florida as the director of player personnel. Went there, was there for one season. To be honest with you, it just wasn't necessarily, I knew for me where I was in my career, I was wanting something different at that time. I was wanting something that was far more, when you work in recruiting in the state of Florida, it is recruiting with scouting. And obviously things are changing nowadays, but that's what it was, just so many, you have so many recruits in that vicinity. Recruits are on campus all the time. It's just a different type dynamic. And so this opportunity at Wyoming came up that as the director, we actually, one of our interns, Sam Patton, who was still the on-campus director at Wyoming, she had gotten hired that summer. So I kind of had a little in of, hey, this job's going to come open, interviewed for it, got it, spent 2 years at Wyoming, 1 year with Craig Bowl, 1 year with Jay Sawvell as the head coach. Really, really good experience overall. It is definitely a throwback program, old school. And I think a lot of us football guys really can appreciate that. It's a program that I think that somebody who played in the, even now, somebody that, especially when under Coach Bowl, but somebody who played in the 70s and 80s could walk in and really appreciate everything about the program. And then, the most recent thing, as you mentioned, just had an opportunity come up to work with Jake Rosenberg and the athlete group. I think it might have been, you guys that helped me with that connection. But had some conversations with him when he first got started about a year ago, roughly. Just kind of kept those conversations going, and then opportunity came up this spring and just started with him.
Yeah. Neil and I are not ones to take credit, but you're welcome. I mean, it's all we can say.
We'll send our account numbers over later, Kirby.
Perfect.
Jake has sat in the seat that you're in right now. We are friends of the athlete group. We're friends of Jake, and we appreciate that. We're glad that you landed in a good place. Now, I'm beating Rodrik to the punch here, but one of the key questions that we ask each guest is, did you have a champion? And you kind of mentioned one guy who said, hey, listen, this is not an ask, this is a tell. You're coming to Kingsville. But was there someone else maybe who played a pivotal role in your career that was really the guy that you kind of credit with helping you give you the breaks that you needed to make it where you are?
I would say the best way to put it is yes and no. There have been multiple different champions, different phases of my career. Obviously the first guy, the time you need a champion the most is the beginnings. Yeah, E.K. Franks, I have to, he was the first guy that I sat in front of him, and kind of gave the impassion, like, hey, you're not going to, I still remember it, like, hey, you're not going to regret it if you give me a chance type deal. And he probably thought I was crazy, which is, he didn't realize was true. So yeah, he'd be one of the first guys, but I'd say I was kind of lucky enough to have people in different phases, different shoot. As you guys know, like I was always really connected to the scouting community as well. That was something I pretty heavily pursued. So, I honestly don't even want to name necessarily anyone specifically, even though I could probably sit here and name about 10, 20 guys. But I was lucky enough being at schools like Arkansas and Florida to have some access to some really high level scouts. Not that there's not high level scouts everywhere, but it just kind of worked out, and we had some really good players. So that obviously helps as well. To the better your players are on a consistent basis, the more scouts come in, and the more better scouts come in. And so the guys that you form a relationship with that move up, they keep coming in. So yeah, like I said, probably 10 to 20 guys, just different phases in my career.
You've worked, if I read your LinkedIn correctly and kind of follow your career, you've worked for Brett Bielema, Dan Mullen,
Yep,
Gus Malzahn, and Craig Bowl. Is that correct?
and then Jay Sawvell for that last year.
And no disrespect to Jay, but those first four are pretty highly visible names who've had some success at
Correct.
Places, and I'm sure Jay will at some point as well. Tell me a little bit about what you took from each one of them, maybe their personalities, the way that they expect you to work, any kind of color you can kind of give our listeners. Have you worked with them?
First off, I like the question. That's good. So I'll start with Coach B. So best way to put it, and this is nothing against any of the other coaches I've worked for. I've always said, and I think Brett Bielema was probably, of all the people I've interacted with, he's one of, if not the best head coaches in college football in every aspect, as far as the best man to work for, to play for. I think he has. There were moments I still remember of just watching him teach, and the way that he could walk that very fine line as a coach of having the right relationship with the players, truly being a teacher, being the father figure, but not too much of it. He kind of walked all those lines very, very well. And then one of those guys, when he walks in the room, you really no one questions who's in charge, and he doesn't have to say he's in charge. He just is. You kind of want that guy to be in charge. I'd say the main things from him, of course, that was my first time, really formative years. So between him and a lot of people on that staff, that was a very strong integrity ethics program. We did things the right way for the right reasons. He's a big Hayden Fry guy. Again, that old school aspect of, it's all about the players. Like, that was an easy guy to recruit for, because you could, and other guys I've worked for as well. I mean, Craig Bowl is definitely this as well, but like, you could legitimately say, hey, you want to leave your son with this man. The guys I worked for there was a high emphasis on attention to detail, which I love. That's strong for me. And then going to Coach Mullen, he is very, very competitive, which I also love. Like, I've always been a competitive toughness is like one of the most important things in every aspect of football. Like, it's not just players, it's the people in the building. If you don't have it, if you're not competitive, if you don't want to be the best, like, I don't want to be around you, really. And he's the same way, but even probably a little bit more intense. So I really, really appreciated, really liked that. Let's see, Coach Malzahn, again, it was a shorter amount of time and not as formative. I'd have to think a little bit more about that, the things from him. Coach Bowl, again, he is very, very intense in terms of attention to detail and specifics. Like, you had to learn what he wanted. You had to learn the information he wanted. Other coaches, you had to have every coach you work for, everybody you work for in this business, you have to learn the things that they're going to care about when you walk in to watch film with them or to go over a player. And I think Craig Bowl had the longest list of things. And he is definitely one of those guys that, because he had been at Wyoming for a long time and had been doing it for a long time, it was one of those things where you kind of had to figure it out on your own. And he also kind of liked to, I think, test people to see how they would respond. So yeah, that's I'll kind of go with that.
Yeah.
I'll give that as my full answer.
Yeah, no, I mean that's good. Again, from the scouting side, everything you talked about, Coach Bielema. Again, I got to visit him at Illinois, and again, Illinois turned into one of the best visits in the Midwest. I know Jay Kaiser, his
Yep.
pro liaison, couple awards from Neil from inside the league, and again, there's no question that again, it goes back to the head coach, goes back to him,
Yes.
the guy in charge. Again, everything comes down from the top, from him. Again, if you want to turn on, remember the Titans, and again, leader, what is it? The mentality reflects leadership, and again, that's the whole thing. It all starts at the top, and again, what he's done there, and again, all these different stops that he's made, he's had success. He wins some bully ball. He has a certain style, and he's done it at three good schools now. And again, so I think the proof's in the pudding there. As you made each one of these different stops, again, you go from SEC, whether Arkansas is a consistently competitive team in the SEC, you can debate that or not. SEC school, you go to another, again, a premier SEC school, you end up with other schools in Wyoming, competitive for a long time at what they've done. UCF, really the last 10, 15 years, they've been a school that's been on the map. How did things change in the way you guys operated? Was it always, hey, we've got this mentality in our personnel department, we're going to go out win, we're going to go out and recruit the best? Or was it, hey, we recruit this way at Arkansas SEC, we recruit this way at Florida, and then kind of the changes from there?
Yeah, I'd say it's a little bit more of the last option. I was getting mixed up, the former or the latter. I think I'll go with, I think it's the latter. I'll say that. Yeah. I think there's a unique blend to every program with the head coach, the location, the history, the culture of the program. So there's unique elements at Arkansas. First off, obviously there was the number one thing I'd say was development. There had been such mentality when it came to the developmental aspect, and then also the character of the players. Some of the highest character guys I've been around were in that program. Florida, it kind of evolved as we were there. We started off a little bit more with the mentality of the, hey, find the. I remember this story Coach Mullen told early on, the Danny Trevathan story of like the 6 foot 3-star linebacker. I honestly can't remember where he ended up playing, but a Group 5 signee, and then he's played in the league for like a decade. And it was kind of like, hey, we want those guys are in our state. Let's find those guys. And then we evolved a little bit. It adapted a little bit. To be honest with you, I think that pressure as far as recruiting in the SEC that impacted things. That probably had a negative impact, I'll be honest, on some things. And then UCF, like I said, 1 year there. So I didn't have as, 4 years at Arkansas and 4 years at Florida, and also 2 as the head guy at Wyoming. Probably had a little better feel for those. And then Wyoming probably fit about the best as far as with what I liked. I used to say that if I was ever in charge of a personnel operation, I would want to plaster on the walls everywhere in the building things along the lines of, we don't talk about stars, we don't talk about offers, we don't talk about rankings. If it doesn't have anything to do with the evaluation of the player, we don't need to talk about it, because the outside noise has such a drastic, massive impact, especially when you're in the SEC. Like, a lot of SEC fans follow recruiting probably more than they do the games. Like they might be as excited about signing a 4-star, 5-star, beating school ABC, whatever their competitors, as they are winning the game on Saturday. That's an exaggeration, but it feels that way. And it's so intense. I think at those schools where you have that fan, we have to have fans to be able to have the jobs and have the industry. So you want that fan support. You want the fans to care a ton, but you also have to balance it with, obviously, like, they're your shareholders. They're the people that keep you there. But you also have to balance that with, you cannot care what they think. And it has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with the fact that they're not in the building. They don't have the information. And also what they think and how they feel about things has nothing to do with the player. And as I'm preaching to the choir here. It's the evaluation process is objectively evaluating the most subjective matter there's ever been. People. And even more subjective, high school age people, and so I've always been pretty intense, and I'm kind of going off a little bit on the question here, but I've always been very intense on, because what we're doing is so subjective and there's so many factors to go into it. You have to stubbornly eliminate the subjective and stubbornly focus on the objective, because if you allow yourself to ever see it, if you allow yourself to ever think of it, it'll impact you. Like I basically, like, it's funny. I got to a point where I would like almost I don't know, put on like mental white noise when it came to things about rankings, stars, offers. Like I just did. I got to a point where that was like, I trained myself to that, because it's impossible to not think about it. It's impossible to not hear about it. Whereas, you know, in the NFL, when you're scouting guys, the culture of NFL scouting is so much different in terms of, like, I'm curious. I'll ask you this: what would have happened if you were in on a school visit and some area or some guy, whatever, referred to, I don't know, I'm not going to name any names, but someone's rankings or someone's mock draft, like, they would have just been laughed out of the room. Whereas in recruiting culture and what it's been for a long time, that doesn't happen. Yeah. And ironically, sometimes the guys doing those draft rankings and the mock drafts, they have more experience than the people deciding who has how many stars, or, you know, things like that. So anyways, I'll get off that soapbox. I could spend a lot of time on that.
Yeah, no, you hit it on the head though, because again, that's the in the NFL, again, it is I would say a growing concern, growing complaint. We saw what happened with Mel Kiper, Shadir Sanders, and again, the noise that is the non-playing football portion of everything with football, college or pro, has gotten so big that those voices have also gotten bigger as well. And
yes,
and as the voices have gotten bigger, right or more likely wrong, the credibility has, like, oh yeah, well, they talk about it all the time, they must really know what they're talking about. And again, it's, you know, just talking to somebody earlier, it's like, they're, again, from the recruiting standpoint, which we'll talk about how the portal has changed that perhaps, but from the recruiting standpoint, again, it is, oh, Alabama offered him, all right, yeah, we're going to offer him. What do you know about him? Nothing, but Alabama offered him. Ohio State offered him. And again, you get that. And again, you don't think about anything else: culture fit, position, what does our room look like? But again, we can't be left out, you know, because again, you talked about that fan base, and I say it all the time: fan is short for fanatic. I mean, there is a reason there, it changes every weekend. They blow with the wind. They have no true skin in the game, other than maybe it upsets their week a little bit. But again, they're out there on their forums and doing all that. But again, we need them. Again, I don't think anybody in the football world would not say, hey, we need fans. That's what allows us to, you know, sit here and have a football podcast and talk about football and have a successful NFL, successful college. Again, you talk so much about the recruiting and how the recruiting evolved, recruiting changing from one to the other. You've also been a part of staffs now, as we've seen this whole thing called the transfer portal and the NIL piece. The NIL piece, again, whatever. The more we talk about the NIL, players have been getting paid, that is one thing. The transfer portal is what really, every guest we have on, is what needs to be brought back to earth. How has, again, you go from recruiting college seniors, college juniors, to all of a sudden now we're recruiting in the transfer portal. Talk about that, how that changed your day-to-day, your week-to-week, your December, your April, and how that really evolved as you saw your time through college football.
Yeah. So first off, I would say it drastically differs program to program. I think, you know, and there probably are some Group 5 programs who prioritize and spend time on potential transfer evaluating throughout the year. At Wyoming, we weren't one of those. And a big piece of it is, you know, the mentality was it's always going to be building through high school. And so I only say that to say that for us, you know, the portal really impacted us right before and during the windows. That was primarily it. Now, when those windows hit, it's the biggest change. There's no downtime. There's no slow time. Like, the times you used to be slow in this business when you worked in college football recruiting, they are the craziest times now. You know, like, you used to be able to take a little bit of a breath in, you know, December, January, take a week after the bowl game and just, you know, disconnect. There's none of that. Like, it's significantly more intense in those times than it is even just like your regular day-to-day outside of those windows. You know, similar thing this spring. Like, shoot, I remember a day at Wyoming when, like, my first spring here, there were a few positions we were intensely looking at. I was the only personnel guy. We ended up adding an intern who ended up becoming a GA and then an assistant. But in that first, few months, it was just me. And I literally shut the door. I was like, I can't have distractions. And the coaches were like, yeah, that makes sense. Makes perfect sense. Cause I was doing the whole process, like literally every step of it, going through the initial list, doing the full evaluation, making the initial contact, having the initial conversation, every piece of it, basically full recruiting cycle in like, an hour. So that's kind of how it impacts as far as the day to day or the lifestyle for, that situation for that level. Now, if you're talking about the bigger programs and again, it's ever evolving and we're seeing the growth and change there. I mean, people do it differently across the board, and you got some, and it's kind of growing into it where it's like pro scouting. And I say that in regards to, you kind of have to have the evaluation in advance, because when that portal process happens, it's so fast. And I've always said this, I think scouting is trying to have the answers before the question is asked. And so the more you can have the answers, more you can answer things before the question needs to be asked, the better off you're going to be. Because when the question is asked and then you have to answer the question, chances of being accurate and timely are far lower. And so, you've got obviously numerous programs out there that there are people that focus primarily on college scouting all year, if not most of the year. Maybe they bounce and they do other things as well, but that may be their sole focus. This guy I worked with at Florida, Billy Homer, who had been with the Niners and then the CFL, and he came to us at Florida, and he was in the same role as far as having a position in an area like we did, but he ended up kind of becoming the portal guy. And then that was again in the initial, first year, whatever it was of the portal. And then now I forget his exact title, but he's the college scouting guy at Ohio State. And that's his entire job. And then you got programs that have multiple people, 2, 3, 4. And again, I think that's going to constantly change. And so, yeah, I mean, it changes everything. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, well, there's a certain school down in Oklahoma that I believe Jake and the athlete group help get set up. Jim Nagy taking a lot of what he did at the Senior Bowl. I think there was just an announcement this week. Again, a whole really good staff, several names that I know in the NFL and in that group, which again, it's the model that is becoming. And again, we'll talk at length about the athlete group at some point. We'll get Jake on here. And again, as it continues to grow, because again, it's not going anywhere. That is the acknowledgement that everybody in the football world is making at this point. It's like, hey, yeah, I don't like the changes, but it's not going anywhere. And I don't necessarily like what it's become, but and the but will tell you everything. So again, it's all evolving. It's all going that way. And again, there will be, it's going to come back to earth, portal, NIL, salary, revenue sharing, all that stuff is going to change. And, a group like the athlete group is going to be a big part of it, I'd imagine. And Kirby will be a big part of it, which is exciting. Let's talk about the scouting focus. Again, so many guys get into personnel at the college level. I'm going to get in. I'm going to be a personnel guy. I want to get into the NFL. Again, that was for me going to Ohio State for grad school. I knew 32 NFL teams were going to be in there. And again, it's a process. It's never a smooth process. For you going to Arkansas, again, growing into that personnel role, realizing what scouting was, but now you're sitting here 10 years down the road. The NFL never came to fruition, no matter how many interviews you had, how many times you went through the process. Talk about what that was like over kind of your career. Where was the NFL in your mindset, and kind of where it is now, and kind of that whole process?
Yeah. So when I first started, that was plan A, B, C, D, however many other letters you want to go down the line of. And, I'm kind of going back to that background of like having walked on, multiple times. I was like, when I was a player, I'm like, in trying to again, make it as a player. There was a phrase that I loved. It was, if it's 1 in a million, at least I got one chance. So like, that was always my mentality. I'm like, well, most people aren't going to do what they have to do to get what they want. So like, I always had the mentality of like, I'm going to do whatever I have to do. So yeah, that was, like I said, every plan A, however long you want to go. I went to the Senior Bowl every year for 4 years, went to the Combine 1 year. I used to joke that I could probably lead a seminar on how to work the room at the Senior Bowl. In fact, there was a time, and this guy's a great dude, so like and he honestly probably was as good of a fit as he could be for the club that hired him. But there was a guy one time, it was his first time there. It was like my third time there. And I could tell he kind of didn't know what he was doing exactly. And again, I know you guys know what I'm referring to, of working that lobby in the Senior Bowl. And I went up and talked to him. I don't know. I'm not saying I made any major impact, but I kind of gave him advice. And then I show up to interview and he's there with me. And then he actually ended up getting the internship. So, but yeah, so it was, I mean, I've interviewed with 11 teams. I've had some of the weirdest, we all have stories, whether it's our own or ones we've heard of, but I've had some weird ones. I mean, I've had, hey, you won the interview, but we decided not to hire anybody. Or one time, 2 different executive assistants or GM assistants told me that, oh, we thought that club hired you. We thought like that both, and so neither one didn't interview me because of that, and one did anyways. And then, other things like that where it's like, hey, you're going to hear in 2 days, and then somebody gets in for a GM job, and okay, you end up hearing in 2 months, and oh, we hired no one who interviewed. Like it is. I mean, it's a crazy tough deal, and so and that kind of goes into I think where I am today in regards to, like I said, I never let myself think of any other option. And as I know you guys know, and a lot of people know in this business, it's not a hard and fast rule by any means, but in general, the standard is, scouting assistants are going to be people in their 20s. In general, I mean, I know there's a certain team where it's like, I think they used to call it like the 20 for 20 club, and it's like 20-year-olds making 20,000, and I think a lot of people probably know who that is. And so when I got to my 30s, I actually had a guy who really good dude who he had been with the Jaguars when I did a training camp internship with him, and had stayed in contact and kind of became a little bit of a mentor. And he and I were having a conversation. I think I may have done like a mock interview with him just to prep. And he basically was like, you're kind of at this point like the house that's been on the market for a long time. There's nothing wrong with that house. There may not be anything wrong with that house, but within reason, people kind of have to wonder. They can't help themselves. And, so I hit a point where I kind of was like, by continuing to fight for it, probably hurting myself more than even helping myself. And so, yeah, I'm 34 now. So, last few years in my 30s, I kind of hit a point where I said, okay, what's the long term? If it's not going to be the NFL, and it could happen, I'm never going to close a door necessarily on things. But at the same time, I kind of adopted and adapted as far as plan, because there's only a certain number of things that can be within your control. And I'm a big, like, I always used to like preach that to interns, and control what you can control. Like that's the only thing you can do. I mean, it's simple. And so, to be honest, that's a part of what led me to the athlete group. Is I started thinking of not that there aren't aspects of the college recruiting personnel world that I don't love, but just in these, obviously things are changing. There's so many different kind of opportunities coming along with the new changes in college athletics, in the football landscape. And so yeah, I kind of got in that mindset of, okay, what other things, could there be long term? And, again, we'll go more in detail about, what we do with the athlete group. Obviously I'm a month in, so I'm still kind of just getting my feet wet and figuring things out. But yeah, that kind of was part of the thing that led me to at least think of what other things might be out there, along with, still personnel jobs in college. So yeah.
Yeah, well, I think we're teasing the athlete group enough where if anybody's interested, your appetite is going to be whet for our full episode on the athlete group with Jake and Kirby. But go ahead, Neil.
The funny thing that you mentioned, Kirby, you said, after, when you hit 30, it's really a lot tougher. And I put that out somewhere in a blog or something where like that. And someone tweeted me and said, you mean I've spent 10 years doing this and now you want me to stop? And my feeling is, do you want to spend 10 more years doing it? Or do you want to find
Yeah.
somewhere else to go where you can really get plugged in? So I'm not trying
Yeah.
to be insensitive to people, but I also don't want to be stupid. I want to be candid with them. And there's a lot more that I want to talk about, and I know Rodrik does too, as far as finding a job and all those kind of things. But before we get too far down the line, in your experience as a G5 DPP, Kirby, let's say you've got a left tackle or a defensive end or a running back, and the light bulb comes on maybe in week 4, and now he is balling out for you, but he's got eligibility left.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a sneaking feeling that, oh my gosh, we've done all this development on this kid and he's really making plays for us now, and what are we going to do in December? I mean, how is it? Is it kind of a mixed emotions thing when you're a G5 GM or DPP in the modern era?
Yeah, I think so. I think there definitely is, and you have those guys. If you trust your eyes and trust your instincts, you have those guys who you kind of already earmark for that. You have that in mind, just like any other program. Who are the guys that are going to be pretty good? Like at Florida, it wasn't hard to see pretty quick that Kyle Pitts was going to be pretty good pretty early on. And so, yeah, you kind of have that idea. Like I said, I go back to, this is at least my mentality with things. I go back to that control what you can control. And my mentality, especially with like a program like Wyoming, my mentality was always, again, you can't control the fact that if, a player ends up playing himself into a, realistic or subjective valuation that is higher than what you can really afford, that guy may leave. That's going to happen. And again, so for me, just how I feel about things, you look at it and say, okay, what can you control? Well, if that guy leaves, you can try and replace him with, a junior college player that maybe can be comparable. You can try and replace him with a portal player that is, Division II or FCS coming up, who again can replace. To be honest with you, I think sometimes some of the and this is no comment on anybody specifically, but sometimes I think it's more obvious that the Group 5 guy that goes up to a Power 4 program, there may not be as big of a discrepancy between him and the JUCO or FCS or D2 player you could get. But there's less data, there's less information. The film is less easy to go through. Certain, Power 4 program, whatever, like there may not be the pre-scouting may not have happened as intensively, or that guy that falls in that category of, again, FCS, JUCO, D2 may not have an agent that has the conversation with him about, hey, your valuation's probably higher. You could probably make more money going somewhere else, whatever the case is. So that's one aspect of it. But I always said, how do you solve that problem? Well, you don't solve that problem when the problem comes up. You solve that problem by high school recruiting. Like, have the next guy ready. Like, and I don't want to. I think I don't know if there is a book or concept that is more oversaturated in this market than Moneyball. But going to that, and this is actually from the book, not just the movie, but that was they knew they had to have the next guy ready. You can't, like, if you look at it, your likelihood, if you're a Group 5 program, you're going to get a better player out of high school most likely than out of the portal, if you scout, develop the right way. So it was more of I'm a big systems and processes person, which again kind of fits with the thing I'm doing now. But you solved that 2 years ago. You didn't solve it 2 years ago, you're SOL. That's kind of the way I always saw it. But yeah, like I said, I've not to go too intense in it, but I've always been very much a control what you can control and keep things as objective as possible and as unemotional as you can.
Is there anything that you can say to a player when they're in that situation to kind of try to recruit them back, convince them to stay, or do you just kind of shrug your shoulders and start preparing yourself for the exit?
You have to know the player, I think. You have to know the dynamics. You have to know and hope they have a relationship with the position coach and the strength coach or whatever. It's the same thing as I always said, okay, how do you recruit better? How do you attract better? Well, you have a better product. Well, the product that you have to sell, and this is obviously before financial was involved in it, it's the program. It's the coaching staff. It's the culture. It's the locker room. It's the people that are going to be around on a day-to-day basis. It's the strength staff. It's all the people. it's everything, and it's fit. And so again, you solve the problem before the problem becomes a problem. You if you're at a Group of 5 program, you want to sign 20, 25, whatever. You want every guy you sign, you want that guy to be somebody that a Power 4 program wants to take, or that an NFL team wants to take. Like, you should never be content. Obviously every draft pick, every signee, whatever needs to be, you want your goal to be that guy to be the best player they could possibly be. But again, it's always, to me, solving the problem before the problem comes up again. And so if you have the right program, you have the right culture, you have something people want to be a part of, and then you also do a good job of identifying what your culture is, identifying the kind of the collective. This is a phrase I actually came up with recently. Like, culture is collective character. Well, the collective character of your building, and then you try and fit players to that. If you create that kind of ecosystem, then your chances are, and there are a few guys that, that, not to go into, just from what I've heard at Wyoming when I was there and recently, that a lot of programs would have loved to have had, and they stayed because of fit and because of the coach and the relationship and, other reasons. So you try and build a system and build a structure and a process to solve those problems before, because again, if you're fighting with different ammo, you got to figure out how to make that ammo win, not try and turn a knife into a machine gun, because it can't.
Yeah, that might be the new saying that you need to get. You can iron that one out a little bit, but I think that would look good up on a program wall. And again, goes back again culturally. Well, again, we talked about with Coach B. Lemma. Again, you've seen the culture in 3 spots. His culture works. His program works. His everything, and now obviously taking it from recruiting only and behind the scenes, we'll call it behind the scenes NIL money, to everything out in front on the table. Again, Champaign, I've been to Champaign. It's a lovely town. I don't know if I'd call it a destination city, but again, he's going to win in Champaign. He's going to win in the Big Ten, his fair share of games, which is really good for him. And before we go and kind of as we wrap up, one of the things that you hit on is you were talking about, getting to know the player. The best way to have that conversation and make sure you're doing right by them is knowing the player. And it's a question that has come up more. I think I've seen it in the last 6 months or so. The debate on what NFL scouts want to see in terms of players stay at Group of 5 or transfer up and go to better competition. And again, scouting is such a unique individual. Yes, you need to know the program. You need to know what Wyoming represents. You need to know what UCF represents. There's a certain kind of player that comes through there, but again, it's never a hard and fast rule. And
correct. Yep.
Scouts will say, "Oh, we want to see them against the best competition." Yes, but there may be a reason a player chooses to stay at Wyoming. So again, all the people, again, we'll call them fans, all the fans out online that are like, "Oh no, they should definitely transfer up to Power 4. Oh, they should also come to my school because they'll be a good player." It's like, again, it goes back to that relationship, getting to know the individual, getting to know the individual athlete, their situation, their family situation, financial situation, what their future, what do they actually want. Was that ever a conversation? Did you ever get in, again, having been through the NFL process, having all the NFL context, was that a conversation you were having as guys were thinking about jumping into the transfer portal? Like, hey, this is what NFL scouts want to see. This is what NFL scouts, and again, forget what the NIL agent, forget about what this potential agent is talking to you about. I talked to 3 NFL scouts today. This is what they told me. Do you get into those conversations?
There was one time, well, actually, maybe more. There have been times that maybe that was requested. Maybe a coach said, "Hey, do you mind reaching out to some scouts and getting some anonymous feedback?" Most of those actually were more in regards to, should a player go to the draft or come back for, that extra COVID year, whatever, things like that. So, things like that happen. I didn't have a ton of those. Those conversations definitely happen. What I would say, the conversations I have had, and just in general, just like everything else, it's all situational. No 2 situations are exactly the same. Let's say, okay, I think that you can find just about as many situations in regards to the NFL projection where a player from Group 5 or FCS went up to a Power 4 and did very well, and again, had film against better competition. And as far as the perception went in the evaluation, maybe their value went up a little bit. And then I think you have plenty of situations where you have guys, there's a certain school in the SEC that I remember signed, I think, 6 guys at one position out of the portal in 1 year. Probably wasn't the smartest decision for all those guys. In fact, there were a couple of guys that went from being the number 1 at their school to nothing, no catches. I guess I gave it away. Receivers, anyways, no production. And so again, it's all situational. And I think that's the best advice. It's, hey, know the situation you're going into, know what you're doing, understand that if you do go into the portal, there is a risk in regards to there's a risk with everything. There's a risk in regards to you might go somewhere where, again, instead of being the number 1 and getting 600, 700 snaps, you might be the number 2, the number 3, the number 4, and you might get 100 snaps or 200 snaps. And, there was one guy I had a conversation with, a scout. He made some comment, and I don't think he wasn't trying to make any point. He wasn't trying to give, me or anybody else ammunition. But it ended up being that somewhat for me. He's like, yeah, we actually kind of like when the smaller school guys go up to the big schools and don't play, because that answers our question. If you can't play at that school, then how are you going to play for us? And it's funny because the situation he was referring to, or at least, sometimes there's some other situations. What if you're a guy that's in his last year and you've got a redshirt freshman coming up, and that redshirt freshman is a future top 10 pick? Doesn't mean you're not a 5th round pick. Doesn't mean you can't play in the league, but you may not start over that guy that they put a lot into as far as, recruiting or investing in or whatever. And so again, it's all situational. And there's an inherent risk. Again, I've seen, O linemen where it's like, hey, program's got 2 or 3 returning starters and they bring in like 4 or 5 transfers. Someone's not playing. Someone's not starting. But on the flip side, there's the other aspect of it where, I remember hearing from a situation of a player that turned down a good NIL payment to go to the league instead of, coming back for his last year that he had. He went undrafted. He got cut. And it's like, okay, he lost a lot of money and he's done now. Obviously maybe, the other, CFL or UFL, but like I said, it's all kind of situational. I think players just have to understand the risks. What I will say in regards to the agent world is be smart about who you work with. And that's a sadly a dangerous game, a dangerous world, because I think that there probably are some people out there that actually have the player's best interest at heart, and are knowledgeable. But in the college landscape, it's few and far between, I think. So I would say in regards to any player, in regards to the agent conversations of, hey, you should do this or you should do this, and especially if they're trying to convince you to go into the portal so that they can then sign you as a client, understand that means that they, will profit off of you, and just kind of take it with a grain of salt. Which I think, to go back, relationships. If you're a college program, have genuine, good, positive relationships with your players, because you want them to come to you or someone else in that building and feel like they will for sure get an honest, objective response and answer that they can trust, and they genuinely believe that you have their best interest at heart. If you have that, they're more likely to come to you instead of someone that, from the outside, because they don't trust people in the program. Like that does happen. So,
Kirby, you've been really generous with your time. And as we wrap things up, there is one question that I do have for you. We talk about how you weren't successful per se, maybe in your end goal of working for an NFL team, or at least haven't to date. However, going to the Senior Bowl, going to an All-Star game, and going to the Combine require a certain skill set to get any kind of traction whatsoever. And by virtue of the fact that you got some interviews, you have had success, at least in getting to the front door, so to speak. Give me one thing to do and one thing not to do when you're going to an all-star setting and you're trying to get opportunities, let's say.
Well, the what not to do is sometimes more about who the person is, which is difficult. Don't be annoying. Don't be pestering. Don't be like, your best success is going to come if you work for a program especially if it's a program that has some decent players. And you put yourself in a position where you already kind of know some people, or the best way to put it is it's more about your mentality going into it, and it's got to be genuine. Like, I mean, within reason, we're talking about if you want to get in scouting, the best scouts in general, I think, are really good at reading and evaluating people. And so you can't fake it, you can't hide it. But in terms of, so again, a big part of it is kind of got to be the right person. And yeah, as far as the how you go about it, it's you got to walk this very, very fine line of being persistent without pestering or annoying, because you got to, and probably some of the best advice I've heard that really made a lot of sense is put yourself in their shoes. Put yourself in whoever's shoes. Like if they look like they're in a hurry, don't annoy them. Like don't cause a negative impact. Don't go there and hurt yourself more than you helped yourself. Find the right time, find the right situation. Ideally, again, have some people that you already have a good relationship with that might introduce you to people, and it builds as you go. But yeah, it's first off, you have to be in the right mentality. You have to be the person that they're looking for, who has the balance of persistence, competitiveness, drive, little bit of crazy, because you got to be a little crazy to want to do it. But you want to keep in mind that every person, doesn't matter the business, but especially football, where we spend a lot of time together in high pressure situations, and you spend more time with the people that are in your building than anyone else in your life. They want to make sure that they want to see you every day walking in the door. So it's the whole, like, there so many aspects of it. It's so complex, but it's walk the line, the line, be yourself, but make sure yourself is not annoying.
It is the hardest line to walk. Of, it's like when it's awesome, made a connection with this guy. Hey man, stay in touch. Like, what does that mean? Like, text you every day, text you every week, once a month? Like, hey, read the room. Like, which goes back to, if you're going to be a good scout, you're going to be a good personality. You can read people. You can, like, oh man, like he didn't answer me this time. Again, this next reach out may be it for me. And again, is he better on text? Is he phone call? Again, I remember for me, it was, I figured out this scout liked to drive late at night for whatever reason. That's when my phone calls were. Again, I'm just a half-hour conversation while he's going from point A to point B during a fall recruiting season. Again, nobody's going to tell you the answer. That is one of the really unique things about scouting, getting into football. Is like there's no handbook. There's no, this is the way. Again, if you're going to be a CPA, you're going to be an accountant, follow these steps, pretty cut and dry. You're going to end up in a business doing somebody's taxes. Hey, I want to be a scout. I want to be in personnel. Okay, get in touch with people and network. Yeah, what does that mean? Yeah, it can mean about 1,000 different things. Good luck with it. Again, start networking now. You'll figure it out. Again, the best way, again, just like anything, the best way to figure out network. Start doing it. You'll figure it out along the way. You will trip. You will fall. You'll run right into a brick wall. But again, if you're not practicing doing it, by actually doing it, again, don't read books. Don't listen to TED Talks. Don't just listen to our podcast. Listen to it. Obviously, go back and listen to the archives. But again, you've got to get out there. You've got to be on the street. You got to be doing the actual work that the scouts are doing. So, I mean, that's sound and sage advice.
One thing I'll add to that, probably one of the best pieces of advice that stuck with me for a long time. It wasn't any, like, I don't know. When he said this, he was not saying it to me, but he was. I guess is a good way to put it. So when I was in college, Bobby Bowden came and spoke at this like Christian men's meal thing. A ton of guys in the room, no football talk, nothing football. And he just happened to mention something to the effect of advice that he gave his sons when they were talking about getting into football. And he goes, only do it if you're obsessed with it. Because if you're not obsessed with it, it's not worth it. Do it if it's the only thing you can do. Do it if it's like you can't not do it. And I think that's as good of advice as there is, because there's not a lot of seats, and so it's crazy. Like, you got to be crazy to within reason to do it. You have to. It's got to be the thing that you want to occupy the vast majority of the hours of every day of your life. And if it's not that, then it's not going to be a good fit. And so it's kind of this pressure cooker that really reveals who belongs and who doesn't. And so that's the first thing I'd say is, like, if you're not in that mode where you're like, again, not to pat myself on the back, but to refer back to it, like, if you're not, if there's a question mark of, should I quit my job and go work for free and make no money and just figure out a way to make it work because I'm so confident that it's going to happen, then it's probably not the right thing. And it's cool. You be a fan, find other ways. I'm actually curious I went through this recently, this calculation. I'm curious, to get y'all's feedback on it. I went through it. I put an estimation of between 400 to 500 personnel roles, personnel scouting roles, true personnel scouting roles in the league and in college at any given time. Rough estimate. I'm sure I'm off. I mean, it changes. It's growing, whatever.
Yeah, growing.
Not a lot of seats. And if you get in, have the best likelihood of being able to have a job is having had a job and having experience. A lot of guys are going to do it 20, 30, 40 years. And so there's just a very, 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 very finite number of opportunities. And it's got to be the only thing you want to do in your life. Those are the people that are successful. I've seen them, countless times. That's who really makes it.
Yeah, no question. Kirby, this has been fantastic. We are over an hour, which, again, for Neil and I, again, easy for us. For some of the listeners, if you're still with us, well done. Well done. If people want to find you, follow you, Instagram, Twitter, obviously we're going to see more about the athlete group. And again, that website, again, we'll be doing that. Another teaser. Where can people follow you to find out more and kind of see whether you're putting out thoughts or anything like that?
Yeah, I'd say main thing, Twitter, whatever it's called. It's just, I'm just at my name. I've been relatively simple with that, but and then have a LinkedIn as well. Definitely, I feel like I may be one of the only college recruiting people that never got an Instagram. So I'm holding strong on that.
Well done. Well done. You are one of the few, I am sure. But again, we appreciate you. We'll have Kirby's handle in the show notes so you can check it out. With the athlete group, best of luck. We know it's going to be good. Again, with everything Jake's doing, again, friend of the program. We're excited to see where that goes. Once again, you're welcome. You're welcome for all we did to grease those kids. I'm joking. We did nothing. Again, if Neil and I can connect you, we're going to connect you. It's up to you. Beyond that, again, you're making the path for yourself now. But again, really, really fun conversation. Looking forward to plenty more that we will have in the future.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on.
Thanks, brother.
Agents, before we go, make sure you go check out Agent Live 360. It is at agentlive360.com for everything you need for your agency, from players to coaches, managing profiles, tracking invoices, sending invoices, getting paid, keeping up on every element of your entire agency. Notification emails, file, folder, storage, ROI, transactions, invoices, calendar, contracts, teams, reps, everything all in one spot for you. That is Agent Live 360. Hop on, request a demo. Yours truly will hop on, walk you through it. I can promise you we will talk some football as well. Sign up now with code TRIAL90 for a 90-day, 3-month trial at just $10 a month for Agent Live 360. That's at agentlive360.com. Go check it out now.